The three-way title race is still very much on, as City wore down United to emerge with the 3-1 home win. United looked to shut down City, but how did Pep's tactical maneuvering, and in particular his evolving use of John Stones, allow the Blues to eventually emerge victorious? Let's take a look. United took an early lead, and that led to them losing any attacking ambition. They made it far too easy for City to escape their own half and camp out in the United half. City operated with their usual back three and midfield box, with De Bruyne and Bernardo Silva looking to stay higher up in the half spaces. And when United were out of possession, their plan was clear: protect the centre of the pitch as much as possible. And that was done by operating in an extremely narrow 4-4-2, with Garnacho and Rashford deeper, while McTominay was just off of Fernandes, primarily looking to make sure that Rodri, the hub of the team, did not get onto the ball too easily. And when the opportunity did come to press, McTominay could push up as the team demanded. However, for the most part, he tended to stay deeper. But if there was a press trigger such as a slow pass, Rashford and Garnacho could at times look to press the wider centre-backs in order to force City backwards. But this was much rarer. With United operating this narrow, City had to find different ways to be dangerous on the attack, and the first, of course, was to use the wider regions. With the wide men expected to get onto the ball for a lot of the game, initially we saw a lot less of Walker looking to overlap, as Pep instead wanted the on-the-ball ability of Foden and Doku to be the widest threat, in order to try and force United to abandon that secure, narrow shape. And how the flanks was attacked was different on the right and the left for City. Down the right, De Bruyne and Foden looked to operate in close proximity throughout the 90, with Rodri often looking to join them, so that they formed a wide triangle. This gave City a lot of options, as Foden could be isolated and look to take on his man and go down the outside, which we saw on many occasions, but on his weak foot he wasn't often able to find the telling cross. But from these positions, De Bruyne could also easily make the half-space run, where Foden could then look to find him for low crosses. However, Onana and Varane in particular were dealing well with these low crosses throughout the 90. But now, Foden also had the option of using De Bruyne as a dummy run, as he could then cut in and look for a cross to the back post. And in the second half, City were overloading the box a lot more, as we'll touch on later, making these crosses much more dangerous. Because space opened up, Foden also had the option of driving centrally and then looking to unleash a long-range shot, and his 9 shots in this match were the most, often facilitated by this. But this wider 3 also had the ability to overload United's own defensive 2, and we often saw Foden initially draw the fullback wider before finding Rodri, who could then find De Bruyne or Foden making the runs into the half space, which had now become unoccupied by a United man. The threat of these 3 out wide was only made possible by their ability to operate in tight spaces, an incredibly difficult skill to train. And if you are a football player, this is where Be Your Best comes in. The virtual reality football training app is currently being used by thousands of players and clubs from across the world, from amateurs to professionals to national associations. And this is where we can jump back to last summer, when the German under-17s were crowned European champions for the first time in 14 years. But how did Be Your Best help them? Well, 2 years before that, Be Your Best started working with the DFB in a study to test the effectiveness of the VR training tool. At a training camp in Spain, the players were introduced to the technology before undergoing a 9-week VR training regime to improve their scanning, vision, and decision-making. The players were filmed in 2 games, one before and one after training, to see if their awareness had improved. And the results were incredible. 80% of the players had more head movement and took better positions in the second game, with average scan rate also increasing by 28% among all players. Dozens of studies have already shown the link between scan rate and an increased forward pass completion, highlighting the importance of training this skill. If you want to train with Be Your Best, all you need is a MetaQuest VR headset. Then head to beyourbest.com and get 20% off your first month or first year subscription by using my code FMS20 at checkout. Thanks to Be Your Best for sponsoring this video. With United often having been drawn to the City right-hand side, City's attacks down the left were much more about isolation rather than combination play, and Bernardo Silva would push extremely high right into the half space to either draw Casemiro and create more space in the midfield, or draw in Dalot. And on the occasions where Dalot was drawn in, that presented the easy switch into Doku, who could now potentially have a 1 versus 1 situation. However, being hyper-aware of that ability, United would look to 2 versus 1 him as often as they could, and making it much harder for Doku to get past his man. And he still did get into promising situations, but the end product was not there. But City was still encouraged by the dangerous scenarios being created, and they were smelling blood. With United being so narrow, in the second half, City were probing for different solutions to this problem. They looked to overload the box much more whenever they could, with the likes of Silva and even Stones looking to make runs into the box. This was backed up by De Bruyne initially starting the half as the wider of the two-man on the right-hand side, as he would then have the potential to swing in crosses into the overloaded box. We even saw a little bit of this when Doku went off, allowing Bernardo Silva, a natural left-footer, to be on the left, so that he had the option to do the same thing. But despite the wide areas being the most obvious threat, it was the centre where City made the difference. The simplest way they looked to increase their central threat was by having more numbers there, which was Foden tucking in and Walker actually overlapping, as we have seen him do in other matches. Foden's positioning would naturally draw Lindelof much more central, who now had a big problem, as with his winger defending much more narrowly rather than out wide, he now had 2 men to cover. As we've often seen, this presented the opportunity for Rodri to look for Walker on the overlap to then try get the ball across to the on-rushing City players. But this increased City's main problem, which was looking to deal with United on the transition. When attacking, City had an extremely high line, and the likes of Rashford, Fernandes and Garnacho would be looking for any opportunity to make the run in behind. And often we saw Fernandes drop deeper to look to receive that first ball and then use his passing ability to find men running in behind. Despite United only ending with 2 shots, they did get into several promising situations. When attacking the centre, a lot of the times, City's pivots would be on the free 8 in almost a man-to-man orientation. But there were situations where Silva high up in the half space would draw Casemiro, and Mainoo would remain slightly more central to try and prevent Haaland dropping in between the lines, which he did do a lot more, particularly in the second half. This did present opportunities for De Bruyne to get on the ball in this region and then look to find a man running ahead of him. But the game breaker was the change structure from Pep, and with United putting so little pressure on the ball, Pep could afford to switch to a single pivot of just Rodri, who would still look to be picked up by McTominay. And now Stones was unleashed from this deeper pivot role and could operate in these regions instead. This would then be backed up by the wider fullbacks in Ake and Walker, who when on the ball could look to draw the narrow winger towards them on either side. And what this now meant is that United were 3 versus 2 down in this line consistently, which caused nightmares for United, as City's quick combination play would then allow them to get into dangerous zones and slip men into the box to try and make the difference. Foden's winning goal was the perfect example of this. Ake draws his winger in Antony way higher. Rodri still occupying McTominay, but pay attention here. Foden, rotated with De Bruyne, Stones and Alvarez have a 3 versus 2 against the United pivots. Foden receives and drags Casemiro higher, and notably Mainoo can't cover as he is occupied by Stones. This means they can play a 1-2 and Foden gets into the perfect shooting position. Overall, it was a deserved win that sees a thrilling title race continue. For the manager tactical scores, despite United going ahead early, they were quite poor, as they offered little attacking threat while still being porous despite sitting deep, meaning Ten Hag earns a 3, and I still struggle to see a consistent playing style from the Reds. Pep's men were a persistent force throughout, and weren't at their very best finishing-wise, but still, they were tactically dominant, meaning Pep earns an 8. But drop your ratings down below. If you enjoyed this one, check out one of these 2, explaining how Pep changed the modern game as we see it, or looking deeper at United's tactical problems.